Imagine if someone made movies about your daily commute and portrayed it as high-speed car chases, dramatic confrontations, and explosive action sequences. That's basically what Hollywood did to the Wild West, took the most boring period in American frontier history and turned it into non-stop adrenaline entertainment. What's up, history lovers? Today we're debunking the greatest marketing scam in American history, the idea that the Wild West was wild. Spoiler alert, most cowboys spent their days doing farm work, most towns were run by accountants, and the famous gunfights happened about as often as unicorn sightings. The real Wild West was so boring that if you made an accurate movie about it, audiences would demand refunds, and the film would cure insomnia more effectively than melatonin. Let's start with Cowboys, because Hollywood convinced everyone they were rugged individualists having shootouts at high noon. In reality, cowboys were basically migrant agricultural workers who specialized in bovine logistics management. A typical cowboy day involved waking up at 4 a.m., eating beans and hardtack, spending 12 hours staring at cow butts, eating more beans, and going to sleep on the ground. The most exciting thing that happened was occasionally a cow would wander off and they'd have to go find it. Cowboys earned about $25–$40 per month, which is roughly equivalent to minimum wage today. They were basically the Uber drivers of the 1800s, except instead of picking up drunk passengers, they were herding livestock across tedious landscapes for months at a time. Here's the kicker. About 25% of cowboys were black, and another 25% were Mexican vaqueros who actually invented most cowboy techniques. Hollywood's all-white cowboy narrative is like making a movie about basketball and casting only short white guys. The reality is cowboys were outdoor accountants with really good horseback riding skills. They kept detailed records of cattle numbers, tracked expenses, and dealt with livestock inventory management. It's like if Excel spreadsheets required spurs. Now let's talk about Wild West towns, because Hollywood portrayed them as lawless hellscapes, where everyone carried guns and violence was constant. Reality check. Most frontier towns were run by bankers, shopkeepers, and middle-class families who really wanted to avoid any excitement whatsoever. A typical frontier town contained a general store, a church, a school, a bank, maybe a hotel, and a post office. The most dramatic thing that happened daily was someone complaining about mail delivery times or arguing about grain prices. Those famous saloons, most were basically coffee shops that occasionally served alcohol. The primary activities were reading newspapers, playing cards for small stakes, and gossiping about who was getting married. It was like colonial America's version of Starbucks, except with worse lighting and no Wi-Fi. Frontier towns had remarkably low crime rates. Dodge City, supposedly the wildest town in the West, averaged about 1.5 homicides per year during its peak period. Modern Kansas City has about 150 homicides per year. The Wild West was statistically safer than modern suburbia. The truth is, frontier towns were populated by accountants, shopkeepers, farmers, and middle-class families who moved west for economic opportunity, not adventure. They wanted predictability, not gunfights. It's like if Silicon Valley was portrayed in movies as constant tech bro-cage matches, instead of boring office work. Time to shatter the biggest Wild West myth: gunfights. Hollywood wants you to believe cowboys were constantly having dramatic shootouts at high noon. The reality? Most documented gunfights in the entire Wild West era can be counted on your fingers, and they were nothing like the movies. The famous OK Corral gunfight lasted about 30 seconds, involved a lot of missed shots, and was basically a chaotic street brawl between two groups of men who really didn't like each other. It wasn't a noble duel, it was more like a particularly violent HOA dispute. Hollywood gunfighters never miss and always fire from the hip with perfect accuracy. Real gunfights involved a lot of panicked shooting, terrible aim, and people hiding behind whatever cover they could find. It was less, "draw, partner," and more, "oh God, someone's shooting, everyone duck." The entire gunfighter profession is basically a Hollywood invention. There were no professional gunfighters wandering town to town having duels. People who got into gunfights were usually drunk, angry about money, or involved in personal disputes. Basically the same reasons people fight today, except with worse accuracy. Famous gunfighters like Wild Bill Hickok and Wyatt Earp were law enforcement officers who occasionally had to shoot people as part of their jobs. Calling them gunfighters is like calling modern police officers car chase specialists, because they sometimes have to pursue suspects. Most frontier towns had strict gun control laws. You had to check your weapons when entering town, like a medieval coat check system but for revolvers. The famous "everyone carries guns" image is completely backwards. Frontier towns worked hard to prevent armed conflicts. So why was the real Wild West so boring? Economics. The entire frontier economy was built around agriculture, mining, and transportation, industries that require stability, predictability, and really good accounting, not constant violence and chaos. Frontier towns existed to serve specific economic functions: cattle shipping points, mining supply centers, agricultural distribution hubs. Violence was bad for business. If your town had a reputation for gunfights, merchants wouldn't come, investors would stay away, and your economy would collapse. The people who moved west weren't adventure seekers. They were entrepreneurs, farmers, and middle-class families looking for economic opportunities. They wanted to start businesses, buy land, and build communities. It's like if modern suburbanites were portrayed in movies as extreme sports enthusiasts, instead of people who get excited about good school districts. Successful frontier towns had newspapers, schools, churches, and regular mail service. They actively recruited doctors, lawyers, teachers, and skilled craftsmen. The goal was to become as civilized and boring as possible, as quickly as possible. The Wild West was actually a massive real estate development project. Land speculators, railroad companies, and territorial governments were essentially running a 19th century version of planned communities. They marketed the frontier as opportunity, not adventure. Most frontier towns established schools, churches, and local government within their first few years. The priority was creating stable communities where families could thrive and businesses could prosper. Violence was seen as a failure of community development, not an exciting lifestyle choice. So how did the boring frontier become the Wild West? Marketing. Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, dime novels, and eventually Hollywood movies turned mundane frontier life into entertainment by focusing on the rarest, most exciting events and pretending they happened constantly. Buffalo Bill Cody was basically the first person to understand that actual frontier life was too boring to sell tickets. So he created a theatrical version with staged gunfights, dramatic horseback riding, and Indian attacks that bore no resemblance to real frontier experience. Dime novels took Buffalo Bill's theatrical approach and amplified it, creating fictional heroes who had weekly adventures that real cowboys might experience once in a lifetime, if ever. It's like if romance novels convinced people that everyday relationships involve constant dramatic declarations of love and mysterious strangers. Hollywood took dime novel fiction and presented it as historical drama, creating a feedback loop where fictional Wild West became accepted as real Wild West. Generations of Americans learned frontier history from movies that were basically historical fantasy with cowboy hats. The irony is that Hollywood's Wild West became more culturally influential than the actual Wild West. More people have seen John Wayne movies than will ever read academic frontier history. The fictional version completely overwhelmed the historical reality. Today's Western lifestyle marketing, cowboy boots, country music, pickup truck commercials, all draws from Hollywood's invented Wild West rather than historical frontier culture. We're living in a society influenced by fictional cowboys who never existed. So there you have it, the Wild West, where the most exciting thing that happened was successfully getting your cattle to market on time, and the biggest conflict was arguing about grain prices at the general store. The real frontier Americans were accountants with horses, and their greatest achievement was turning wilderness into suburbs as quickly and efficiently as possible. Maybe the real treasure was the small business opportunities they developed along the way. If you enjoyed learning about history's most successful marketing scam, smash that subscribe button and check out our other videos. Thanks for watching, and remember, real cowboys would definitely have preferred air conditioning and steady Wi-Fi.